Ladies and gentlemen, this is Hypnovision Studios, and I am your host, Nicholas. Today, I thought I would do something a little bit different and be more interactive with this video package. Today's topic is transmutation of sexual energy, and it is also in some responses to comments left on my semen retention video. So, if you're new here, please make sure you hit that subscribe button if you find something interesting, and please leave a comment, a question, or a passing thought in how this relates to you. As always, you are greatly appreciated, and you inspire me to continue this journey. So I want to start off with a few comments that I found to be very positive, very uplifting, and I will put these up on the screen as I read them. But one of the users, thank you so much for this. I'm also a Life Path 9, Aquarius Sun, Pisces Moon, and Virgo Rising. My life started transitioning after my Saturn return in March of 2023. I am 29 years old and currently on a 189-day streak. My highest is 214 on semen retention. And record of a 7-day dry fast. I am more optimistic than ever. I say congratulations, keep up the good work, and that shows a level of drive and determination within that is very admirable. Next we have Ruben Sanchez, and I won't always try to pronounce the usernames. If I put it on the screen, then I'll let you read it because sometimes they are hard to pronounce. I watched the whole entire video, gonna watch it again eventually, but it all makes sense. I've been practicing SR, which is semen retention, for the last 9 months. My longest streak is 45 days. Everything is good in moderation. Good video. So, you know, guys, part of this journey for me has been self-realizing and honestly being honest with myself has helped me to release a lot of things. So your comments actually do inspire me, and that is why I'm doing this video, changing the format a little bit and giving recognition to some of the comments that were left in the comment section on that semen retention video. But also this next one is kind of a leaping point into this video as a follow-up to it in a way. We have Leon commented, I started a business 3 years ago. I am on semen retention of 3.5 years, and my progress is non-stop in my life, business relations, and finance. So we have a follow-up comment left in a reply. How do you channel all that energy? I'm quite a few days in now, and the energy is so intense. I want to say to everybody, first of all, congratulations. That really does show a level of self-commitment, a level of self-devotion when you are doing these type things for the right reasons. So with that, I kind of want to get into channeling the energy and also how it relates to the creative expression of life. So you really can't talk about this without talking about Napoleon Hill. Think and Grow Rich is a book that I highly recommend, and there is audio formats of that which you can find right here on YouTube. So if you're not a great reader, you can always find the audio book and wear headphones or have it playing in the background somewhere. It's a very highly recommended book to read and to learn about the sexual transmutation, because it gives you a very descriptive explanation for it. And as a matter of fact, off of page 176, I will read a little bit of this and then go into a personal testimony for myself. So page 176 in Think and Grow Rich, sexual transmutation is simple and easily explained. It means the switching of the mind from thoughts of physical expression to thoughts of some other nature. Now, this whole process I have learned a lot about word association and words at play. And I know that sounds silly, but words at play, sometimes when sight to sound and how we spell words can be completely different, but the understanding of them also can be a curveball in some sense. Sex desire is the most powerful of human desires. When driven by this desire, men develop keenness of imagination, courage, willpower, persistence, and creative ability unknown to them at other times. So strong and impelling is the desire for sexual contact that men freely run the risk of life and reputation to indulge in it. When harnessed and redirected along other lines, redirected, to me that word kind of stands out because the energy always wants to move, and if you can, through the thought process, redirect how that energy is moving, that is exchanging it. So in the world of construction where I came from many years ago, we used to build heat exchangers where you would exchange the temperature by running through something like a radiator. If it was industrial, this would be industrial size heat exchanger where you might have hot water being pushed through pipes, and as it's being pushed through those pipes, there's air blowing across the pipes, exchanging the heat out of the water and cooling the water as it returns back into the system. So the redirection along other lines would essentially, you could equate that to a very similar process of transmuting the sexual desires. So moving on, the transmutation of sex energy calls for the exercise of willpower to be sure, but the reward is worth the effort. The desire for sexual expression is inborn and natural. The desire cannot and should not be submerged or eliminated. What does that mean? To not be submerged would be to deny your own desires, to put limits on your own desires based upon beliefs that are given to you from the outside world. And what kind of beliefs would that be? Well, one of them, as an example, could be shame, could be self-guilt, things like that. You shouldn't have those thoughts. But if they are born from desire and you hide them or suppress them, then you are actually energetically putting a stop to that flow of that desire, meaning you are self-limiting the flow of energy within yourself based upon external conditions. That is very powerful if you really sit and think about it. So the desire cannot and should not be submerged or eliminated, but it should be given an outlet through forms of expression which enrich the body, mind, and spirit of man. If not given this form of outlet through transmutation, it will seek other outlets, purely physical channels. Now, if you want to break down the physical channels, there are many ways you could see that. Sexual frustration could lead to anger, it could lead to short tempers, it could lead to all kinds of things. And if we are not in control of our body, if we are not in control of understanding the emotional range within ourselves, then quite literally, we can be controlled by these desires themselves. The feeling of the desire is what is driving from the root base. A river may be dammed and its water controlled for a time, but eventually it will force an outlet. The same is true of emotion of sex. It may be submerged and controlled for a time, but its very nature causes it to ever seek means of expression. If it is not transmuted into some creative effort, it will find a less worthy outlet. So guys, this is from Think and Grow Rich on page 176, and I highly recommend Napoleon Hill because all of his work is great, and I won't really go diving deep into that in this video. I do have some handwritten notes that are more testimony for myself, but when it comes to channeling the energy, first you really have to understand what is the desire that is within you, and I can't answer that question no more than anyone on the outside of me can answer that same question for myself. Only I can understand the desire within myself, but first I have to become fully aware of the parts of that desire that I had previously submerged. These would be the things that I would perhaps have overthought in the past, things that maybe I held guilt or shame because of the family system I grew up in. And there's no shame to any of this. This was a part of having to become really brutally honest with myself in some areas. And, I wrote about the five senses last year. And interestingly enough, when it comes to semen retention and it comes to that whole concept, you often will come across in research NoFap. And I do want to make a distinct separation between the two, because NoFap is a more modern slang for basically masturbation. Let's just be honest, right? So we call it NoFap. That's the modern day term. So when it comes to the chemical reaction and the chemical release, and when it comes to energy wanting to move, you have to understand that there are multi-layers of this process that are happening at once. It is not simply just a desire alone. It is also the chemical and emotional conditions that the desire itself creates. So we may have a strong desire for something, but yet because it is submerged and we feel guilt, embarrassment, shame, admitting to someone on the outside of us that we have this desire, we can limit ourselves from experiencing this and internally feel that we do not deserve this, and that can cause a depressive type reaction in the body, because if we feel bad about ourselves, the mind is going to start releasing signals to the nervous system to generate a chemical compound that matches that thought and emotion. Likewise, when we become aware of the observer effect of observing our thoughts, we can pick and choose to not allow certain thoughts to give us that negative response through the nervous system. However, the multi-layer part of the system is also understanding that the body has been preconditioned up until any given point that you are presently aware of a pattern within yourself. So I know it can sound complex, but let's say in order to get to semen retention long term, first, you either or, right? You either have a pattern existing that you need to break in order to get to that point of semen retention. So, semen retention and NoFap often are interchanged in online communities, but they are absolutely different practices. And so, when I say no shame in a lot of this stuff, I really am saying this from a point that these are things that I had shamed myself in the past because I either did not know the knowledge or did not understand, didn't fully connect all the dots. And through this process over the last 2 years, it has helped me to understand a lot of this stuff. So with NoFap, you would understand through the lens of having a problem of too much masturbation. Right? Let's just cut through all the clutter and just call it for what it is. Everybody does it at some point. So I see a lot of stuff online, where especially in this generation and previous generations, if you look at the evolution of technology and you look at the evolution of porn, for example, in the early 70s versus the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, obviously nowadays anybody can go on Google and a few keywords You can find all kinds of content. It's that easy. So there is also the chemical compounds that happen with this, right? So dopamine is very addictive. When we don't understand the driver of dopamine, we are actually getting dopamine hits every time we open our phone. We get a notification, we get a text, we get a call. Something happens that makes us have that it's a brief, short-lived good feeling that eventually over time will deplete itself, because that is generated from the inside. And when we stop generating it from the inside and start from the outside getting these little dopamine hits, we have taken our attention from too much of inside and put it too much to the outside. So if you take that a step further and go into the idea of masturbation and start to break down the difference in ejaculation and orgasm, for example, you will start to understand that porn desensitizes you. So what is in the word desensitize is senses. What do humans have? We have 5 senses. So if you are desensitized sexually, then you are not using your 5 senses. You are desensitized, meaning you are solely addicted to the feeling of ejaculation. And at some point, just like pills, just like any other addiction, you have to keep doing it more and more and more, chasing that dragon to experience that same level of chemical response. So in that essence, you are more addicted to the feeling than you are the actual video that you are watching. So desensitizing in the 5 senses, it wasn't even until like I read some of these comments that light bulb went off in my mind that, hey, wait a minute, yeah, I remember writing about the 5 senses early on in my semen retention journey, but now reading this, it's just like, you know what, I do also remember, the concept that porn desensitizes the mind. So connect those dots, and now you gain a new understanding, a new bit of information, and hopefully you find that helpful. I certainly did. So how do you get from nofap and start to practice semen retention? How do you channel energy, and how do you transmute or exchange this energy for a better energy and clarify and purify your energy? So one of the things for me is first to say, you know what, me personally, yes, porn has caused a problem in my life. Not just me, but I understand that it's a common thing that most people will not openly talk about, because there is that sense of embarrassment, that sense of shame. So that causes us to submerge certain aspects and try to keep those things hidden. And when you do things like that, you actually change your behavior patterns, and not just your behavior patterns, but it changes the chemical makeup in your body. So on the journey to semen retention and learning to channel that energy you would have to have an admission to self, and you don't have to make that admission to anyone on the outside of you. That is something that you quietly do with yourself. And I also want to add that the most powerful thing that you have is paper and a pen, because you can write anything that you think of, write it out, and then you can also ask yourself, how does it make me feel? And if it is something that is a negative aspect, then you can start to rework and revise. Maybe this is something like porn that, hey, you know what? I'm really embarrassed to talk about this. I don't know how to approach somebody. I don't know how to open up. So I will write about it. I will ask myself, how does it make me feel? And then as my feelings start to become more in a line, now I'm starting to change how I feel about it. So that is one way to transmute some of that energy. But you have to understand that also the body itself craves that addiction, that feeling. So let's say, for example, that you had a routine, right? That's quite possible. If you have a pretty steady routine, then perhaps that you have a certain allotted a time that you will find yourself watching porn, masturbating. And when you stop doing that, you might feel resistance, you might feel agitated, you might feel all kinds of different ways. Just like any other addiction, it is the absence of that chemical being produced that causes a withdrawal. So meditation is something that can help you with that. And there is, I will try to put some graphics on the screen. There are specific meditations dealing with the sexual energy because it comes from the root. And when we're specifically talking about men, and we think about the fruit of our labor and the fruit hanging from the tree, then we quite honestly understand that our nuts are just like nuts hanging from a tree. And the root system on a tree, if you equate that to the nervous roots in the nervous system, then you can equate the soul in the ground that the tree is planted in to the soul of a man, in which that very first seed was planted in the root. So in order to understand the desire of sexual energy is to understand from that root base what is coming up through that soul and manifesting from that tree, from those fruits. And it's hard for me to talk about this stuff without revealing what the heck blood magic is. So blood magic, that is an interesting topic, and quite honestly, when you start to Google stuff like that, it can be quite confusing. So this goes back to the cycles that both men and women have. Now, everybody knows that women have cycles. Not everybody, not every man, not every woman realizes that men do in fact have cycles. I won't get down into the months, the fact that we really do have 13 months, not 12 months. The math doesn't lie on that, but there is that sense. And just like, one of the users was talking about a Saturn return, that is a real thing because the energy, just like gravity, it affects the chemicals within our body. This is the magnetism of it all, right? The moon affects our emotions, which is the water. It affects the tides of the ocean. It affects the level of water. And, so there is that magnetic pull that happens with that. So yes, all the other planets do affect us. And that's why we have birth charts that depict where each one of the planets were at that exact giving time of birth. And that is like a key to the zodiac. You have like the 12 signs, and if you don't understand that you are all of those signs, you have attributes of all of those signs making up the individual person. So if you look at it like this, there is 12 zodiac signs, there's 12 cranial nerves. That right there suggests that there is a correlation. 12 times 12 is 72. 72 and 72 will equal 144, which is a master number. And it's not so much about the 144,000 that go to heaven, because once you understand that heaven is head in, there is that wordplay association. Head in, get it? Heaven, head in, there is 12 cranial nerves. When you multiply them, you end up with 144,000. When it comes to channeling, we start to understand the different brainwave states. We channel emotional energy through, which is emotions is energy in motion. And the different channels can quite literally be the emotional ranges of color and sound and how we feel, and the thoughts which would come through the conscious mind through the different brain states. So you have gamma, I forget, alpha, theta, delta, and I forget there's one more I feel like I'm forgetting, but I will put a graphic on the screen. So channeling would be to understand that you have fast moving thoughts and slow moving thoughts, and I've said this before, but how we pick up that information and then channel it back out. So when you start to understand the transmutation of sexual energy and desire and those type things, and we start to gain control over our body, which is the beast, and we can contain the energy within us, we start to become aware of how that energy wants to move. Then we can redirect it with our mind, because we are becoming more aware of how the energy is wanting to move, how we are diverting that energy into something else. So when it comes to creative ideas, if we are talking about energy, right? We are talking about emotion. We are talking about energy in motion. Energy always wants to move. Nikola Tesla is like the golden child for this, because quite literally his work is so amazing. When you look at the Tesla coil, and then you look at the human body with the chakra systems and the crown on top, you start to understand that we are quite literally like a Tesla coil. And Nikola Tesla was known for free energy. So what does it mean for free energy? Most people externalize this as in like a cell tower or some kind of tower that would transmit electricity to my house, and I could light my house without cables. But what if, just think about this for just a minute, what if that free energy is the emotion within us that is trapped by the thoughts of self-limiting beliefs? So if we want to free that energy, then we must break through the self-limiting beliefs up into the higher dome of our mind, in the higher echelons of our conscious thoughts, at those faster moving thought waves, and tap into those channels. Now we are cooking. Like, I feel goosebumps now. I feel like all over my body goosebumps, because freeing that energy from the desire is allowing that energy to start moving. And so when it starts moving and it starts getting up into that upper echelon, into that dome, the resonant frequency changes. So the idea and concept of free energy turn back around into the human body, into how it relates. If you want to free your energy, free your mind. And when your mind is free, the energy can flow. And if the energy can flow, so does the creative expression of life. It's simply amazing. And if you want any kind of further evidence, then my YouTube channel is one example, to be honest. Because the idea of free energy and transmuting sexual energy and desire, it all comes from the root chakra, and that is in the word root, the root system. So if you poison the root, it also poisons the fruit. And if the root and the fruit are poison, then consumption of that is like consuming toxins. So the further that degradation goes, and looping this back around to blood magic for just a minute, when it comes to knowledge, right? They depict the apple with a bite because they bit the forbidden knowledge. Actually, it's probably the other way around, the opposite, and Mercury retrograde teaches us this, and the law of opposite teaches us this, that when people are trying to keep information from us, they still have to tell us what they are doing. And it is through certain times that these channels open up for us to hear clearly what the truth is. And, you know, when it comes to life path number 9, I had seen somebody on a video a couple months ago where he was saying that there were certain times in life that the alignment is just right, where somebody is in touch with a life path 9 and some very valuable information is exchanged, but it takes time for that seed to grow. So somebody on a life path 3, for example, might get information from somebody from a life path 9, but it's not their time to understand it. But the seed has been planted, and that seed will grow. And at the right time, when that seed busts through the soul level, a new understanding will be gained by that person on a life path 3. That's how it works. So there's a lot to it, but there's also how we relate to these different aspects. And it's very interesting to me, the whole Nikola Tesla stuff, the coal, the aspects of all the chakra systems, the good and bad of it, the duality of life, how our thoughts are dominated by the feeling and emotion within inside, how we perceive them, whether or not we are actively observing our own thoughts, and what is reflected back to us through others is thought transmission. So if we get into a pattern of trying to validate and confirm on the outside exterior only, right? If we are telling ourselves that I am the most sexiest man alive, and I do that all day long in the mirror, and I don't feel sexy, yet I go out and try to elicit. What is elixir? Now you're talking about witchcraft and spellcraft and all that kind of stuff. Elixir. I want to elicit a comment from a person because I have set and told myself I'm the sexiest man alive so much that I need verification. So I will go out and seek attention and try to elicit that type of confirmation, that type of validation. Now, more times than not, you see this in the female gender, attention seeking on blast, right? So when we start talking about semen retention, we also have to understand that this is a practice. There is no time you should ever shame yourself or feel bad if you have what most would call a relapse. I certainly experienced that in the beginning because of understanding the difference between the orgasm and ejaculation. Because the inner orgasm of the nervous system lighting up inside and generating, which is funny because G is symbolic to 33 Masonry, which is the generative principle. You begin to understand through the root desire of sexual orgasm that it is the energy within the body that you are generating the feeling from within, from inside of you, is where that energy is being generated. So if you can sit in meditation and keep creating through simulation of the mind, that feeling of orgasm is a body orgasm. It becomes cosmic when it reaches the upper chambers of the mind and releases that chemical, and it washes back down over the body. So quite literally, you don't need sex. You don't, unless you're trying to produce a child. Now that is a whole nother channel of topics that I'm not going to go into in this video. But if for some reason, like myself, my older self, my older version of myself, did not understand the difference in the internal orgasm versus the feeling of ejaculation, because they are quite literally so close together when it happens, then if you equate orgasm to ejaculation, what do you think is happening every time you ejaculate and then you start to become addicted to that feeling? You are depleting the life force within, meaning that that fruit hanging from your tree between your legs contains all the ingredients to make life. And when it is not used, it goes back into the brain, travels back up the spine, the colostrum, the Christos oil. And that is the washing of the mind with new blood cells. So if you want to know what blood magic is, and forbidden knowledge would be to withhold that understanding from mankind so they do not renew their mind, and this will further not allow them to understand the beast of the body that they are living in, right? So you can be controlled by your body and feel like there are so many things happening to you on the outside that if this hadn't happened, then I wouldn't be in this situation. If that hadn't happened, then I wouldn't be in this situation. You are still constantly looking to the outside world and pointing the finger to all these different things. But when somebody like myself comes across this understanding and starts to put it back out, it is for the greater good of humanity and fellow men out there who, like myself, may have a similar type background. So I also want to point this out when it comes to some of those semen retention videos that are online, and this is not to knock anybody, but you must understand and pay attention to the underlying message that some of these videos are trying to convey to you. Because if I sit here and tell you that semen retention is going to make you super attractive to women, and that women are going to be falling all over themselves to get close to you, that they can smell your semen retention on you, what effect do you think, cause and effect wise, this is going to have mentally on another male, right? So if he starts to practice semen retention, and in his mind the suggestive thought is that because I am practicing semen retention, I am automatically, women are starting to notice me. And this is one of those things where what you focus on grows. Because you're focusing on the fact that women are paying more attention to you, you will start to see that happening in your life. And if you are not careful, you can have a very quick relapse. You could get intertwined with somebody that does not have your best interest, and maybe on a conscious level they are not as aware that you are about the energy flow, the energy dynamics, the inner workings of the body, the nervous system, and all of these things. So quite literally, you have a foresight, and that person may not have the same foresight. That person may be very nearsighted, and when it comes to wordplay, narcissist. They can only think about the present moment, living in the moment without the consequences of the cause and effect of it. So if I were to get up here and say semen retention is going to make you a ladies' man, it's going to make you a sexual god, women are going to fall at their feet and grovel at you, I would be feeding you a line of bullshit and setting you up to fail. So what I will tell you semen retention will do is better yourself, better your inner self, which if you allow that seed to start to grow, you will start to see changes in your life that are betterment for you, not any other person on the outside of you. And so what better gift can you give to a fellow human being other than a gift that allows them to have a better quality of life from the inside? Because one of the worst feelings in the world that you can ever have is to be trapped in your head with a lack of understanding and not being able to understand why certain things keep happening to you or happening around you. So, this is one of those things, guys. I don't have to make this video. I want to make this video because I feel like somewhere out there, there's somebody watching that is finding this information useful. So with that said, there's a few topics up here that I want to close out with and really point out. Let me get my page back right. So we've already covered the fact that energy wants to flow, and I'm just going to read right from this and I'm going to close out the video. And again, guys, if you stuck around this long, I truly appreciate you, and I hope that you are starting to make sense of some of this stuff. Now, maybe you do know about some of this stuff. Maybe there's certain aspects that are new to you, some aspects you've heard of. Maybe it's just helping you connect the dots. Either way, if it helps you, that's all that matters. So energy wants to flow and is in a constant flux. So let's take the example of water. Hot and cold water are different by description, but both are still water, for example. So in the self-journey of the concept of self-esteem and how it relates to self-image, now we are really talking about, is our self-image based on how we feel about ourselves? That so-called hot water turns into steam and builds pressure. If we equal to emotional energy, perhaps, as water heats up from the excitement of an idea or thought that hits our brain, and it sends signals to the nervous system to release a chemical charge. This could be seen as a person taking passionate action based off of an idea or a thought. On the other hand, the very fact of becoming aware can create a ripple pattern in one's behavior. This perhaps is the resistance to change. And what I mean by this, like maybe a person has a sudden realization that maybe I do have a porn addiction, but it's not the porn, it's the addiction to the feeling of releasing and ejaculating. The resistance to change would be that the body wants that feeling, right? So you have to resist masturbating, and the uncomfortableness is the body craving that feeling. So perhaps some actions happen too fast, and the water, as it warms up, it's like having it too hot, and it goes beyond whatever the heat temperature requirement you want it, and then it turns into steam. So, and we know steam creates pressure. And just like in Napoleon Hill a while ago, you can dam up a river, but eventually that pressure will push through, it will break through to the other side. So that is one way you could look at it. Likewise, slowing down some of the reactions to certain thoughts, this would be tapping into the different brainwave states. So you have your slower moving ones that would be more intuition from your imagination, and also the gateway to where you can start to affect the subconscious and change and revise some of these ways we feel about and identify with different thoughts. So if we slow down the reaction time, then we are calming those waters back down. So it is like shaking a 2-liter bottle. You can't open it right away. You have to let it sit for a while before you crack the lid, or either you have to crack it really slowly and let the pressure off, pressure relief. So self-emissions will help you to this, and also start to understand different beliefs that you have about yourself, and also understanding that everybody, might have similar experiences, but everybody's, from different points of the same reality, but they are also different variants in how we all come together in these viewpoints. And we understand that when we are not conscious of certain actions, and we are not conscious to our own reactive states to certain things on the outside, there is an input-output manner to this. So, you might have a situation where somebody knows that you're always going to respond in a certain way, but when you change that response and suddenly they cannot get that same response for you, they have to ramp it up to get that response out of you, which means they have to exert more energy to elicit the same response from you. That is the flip side of what I said a while ago. So how do we learn to contain and direct the sexual energy after we figure out what our desires are and become really freaking honest with ourselves through the topic of semen retention? Well, first, that is the self-acknowledgement and self-honesty. And ascended master literally means to ascend the mind over the body. So taking control of the beast of the body that you inhabit means to be accountable and take control of how you are tapping in to respond, how you are tapping in and generating your feelings, and really taking charge of that. And I will say this one last thing as I close this out. As a life path number 9, there is one thing I have learned about karma and the mirror principle, which is life is a reflection of our truest desires and states. So, I don't want nobody to really start to, when you understand algorithms of social media, whatever you search for, then, the algorithms start to give you more, right? Life is kind of like that. So if you search for something on Google and then you go on Facebook and all of a sudden it's advertising to you the same thing, and it's starting to give you more reels of the same thing, that is quite simply the mirror principle, and it's very easy to observe through social media algorithms, but it also happens in our life, because if we start to focus on something, we see more of it. It's like buying a new car that's red, and now all of a sudden that's all you see everywhere is that red car. It's because it is really dominant into your awareness at that given time. It is reflected back to you. You see more of it. So one of the things that I experienced early on in my journaling, when it came to repressed and suppressed thoughts and emotions, was I had wrote one day, what is the deception in the reflection? And this was meant as an introspection point for myself. But not knowingly, I was starting to focus in on certain things that were actually negative. And as these things started to uncover and reveal themselves through my surrounding environment, I did have a reaction to some of it that was a little bit triggering. But now I understand, looking in hindsight, the very fact that I wrote what is the deception in the reflection because I was seeking truth meant that I had to start becoming more honest with myself in order to see that truth, and I had to release certain things that were limiting beliefs so I could free the energy and let it flow. This goes to, I had this talk earlier where we were discussing one of the scenes from Bruce Almighty 2 where Jennifer Aniston is sitting with Morgan Freeman, and the scene is, if a person prays for courage, does God give them courage, or does God give them the opportunity to be courageous? So sometimes what we wish for, we cannot be so specific so the universe can deliver it to us. Maybe it is courage that we are looking for, and we only need the opportunity to be courageous. Just like this video, to get up here and talk about semen retention, to talk about transmuting sexual desires is something that I never thought I'd be doing. But I have the opportunity, I have the platform, and I have the voice, and I am extremely grateful for the comments that you guys leave. So it has taken on its life of its own. And when I compare this back to the beginning of this journey, this is the point where I'm starting to see those fruits being returned back to me. And now I am magnifying those fruits and giving them back. And it's becoming its own thing. So guys, that is one way, an example of transmuting sexual energy. The intimacy with yourself has to come before you worry about intimacy with other human beings. Because if you don't know yourself, you don't understand yourself. If you can't nurture certain aspects of yourself, then perhaps you will seek those from the outside. And we need not seek anything but the kingdom of God, which is within us. The kingdom is in the head. Head is where the seat through the pineal gland and the 2 hemispheres of the mind, the 12 cranial nerves, is how we free the energy to flow up into heaven, right? So, as a child, we often wonder what heaven is. We associate that with some outside place out there somewhere, up in the sky, but it is actually up in the head of the dome. And one last thing, when you think about churches, you think about great cathedrals and vaulted ceilings and dome ceilings. When that sound goes up in there, it's like a bowl turned upside down. It's just resonating all around. And you think about old bells and how the bell hits and it resonates and vibrates. When we echo certain things we heave it up into our head, it does resonate within our mind. So there is a energetic signature that happens with that. And guys, I hope this helps you. I know that before I got on this video, I meditated a little bit, and I was kind of like, I'm not sure how I'm going to tie all these points together. I'm not sure how it's going to work, but I do know one thing. I'm just going to get on the mic and I'm just going to talk, and I'm going to try and put a different spin on how I present myself. But sexual desire is always there. You can't repress it. So repressing it is actually resistance to self, to deny that it exists, which is like denying God. I mean, we all know that if you stop thinking about breathing, you are going to continue to breathe. If you don't sit around and think about how many times your heart beats in a minute, it is automatic. So there is always that force, that life force that is always automated, that is natural, nurture, that is coming from within. So we are always connected to universal life force. We are always connected through the ether of air to each other. You start to understand that the illusion of separation is just that, an illusion. We are always connected. We are always one. And with that, guys, I will see you down the road.